Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the HR Buddy HR and Employment Law update for February 2026. Apologies for the delay in getting going this morning, and thanks for bearing with us. And you're all very welcome this morning. HR Buddy, of course, is an Irish-based HR consultancy, payroll provider, and HR software company. I'm joining you this morning from the Killarney offices. However, of course, at HR Buddy, we work nationally to deliver flexible HR solutions to companies of all sizes and across many sectors, as well as supporting overseas companies with EOR services. Today, as I said, you're joining us for the February installment of our HR update series. However, if you want to stay up to date with the latest developments in the HR space, you can sign up to our monthly newsletter mailing list. You can do so at the website below, or you can just drop us a line here at info@hrbuddy.ie to stay informed on all things HR and employment law. Now, for today's discussion, we have some very timely HR updates and important developments to brief you all on. I'm glad to say we're glad to be joined by HR Buddy's own HR business consultant, Patrick Scanlon. Good morning, Patrick.
Morning, Colin.
Um, and of course, as we all know, a major focus for organizations as we look ahead into 2026 is the whole area of employee well-being. And I'm delighted to say that we are joined this morning by Grace Walsh, strategic consultant with Irish Life Wellbeing, to explore some key findings from recent research and to discuss well-being from a strategic perspective. Morning, Grace. And also this morning, we're going to briefly talk about a HR solution that is available to help you manage the most important asset in your business, your people, and to help you take back some of what I'm sure is an extremely scarce resource, your time. As I said, we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers on the topics discussed this morning as well. So with that being said, I'll now hand you over to Patrick.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Colin. So just there's a couple of employment law updates that I just want to look at this morning. So if you can just skip on there to the next slide, please, Colin. So the first update that I want to look at is in relation to the new part-time work code of practice. Now, this replaces the previous code of practice that was implemented in 2006. So this is a new one replacing that code. And the purpose of this code is to make part-time work more accessible to individuals such as students, carers, parents, individuals, and that the part-time work would suit better. So basically making a more inclusive workforce. Also, the Code of Practice seeks remote part-time work as one of the flexible work options available to employees and employers. Now, the Code of Practice was designed by the WRC and provides practical tips and insights for employers and employees when it comes to arranging and developing part-time work arrangements within the workplace. The code itself, it encourages companies to consider part-time work at roles at all levels within the company, up to and including senior level roles. One thing that I do want to point out is that the Protection of Employees Part-Time Work Act underpinned this code of practice, and still there's no changes to this act. This piece of legislation prevents employers from treating part-time employees less favorably than full-time employees. So that piece of legislation exists hand in hand with this code of practice and continues to do so. Um, so what the code of practice also does, it encourages companies to consider part-time work when developing policies, particularly policies including flexible work policies, recruitment, training policies. Actually, as part of this code of practice, employers are encouraged to schedule training during hours of work that part-time employees are actually rostered and scheduled to work rather than outside their work hours where possible. Just one thing that I do want to stress this morning is that this code of practice does not provide employees with a right to part-time work. This code of practice acts very similar to the right to request remote and flexible working in that it provides the employees with the right to request, but not the right to actually receive part-time work. So what kind following the fallout of this code of practice, what three tips can we provide you with this morning? So the first of all, I'm encouraging companies at the moment to update their internal policies and consider part-time work when developing and updating policies. So I would have mentioned some of those policies already. Also, the WRC encourages employers to review role suitability for part-time work. So when a company is reviewing a role, whether it be for just the job design itself or for recruitment, employers are asked to consider whether such a role is suitable for part-time work. And when deciding if a role is suitable for part-time work, employers can consider objective criteria such as service needs, supervision needs, what workload would converting a role into part-time create for other roles, regulatory requirements. So those are all factors that employers can consider when determining if a role is suitable for part-time work or not. Um, the right to request part-time work existed prior to this code of practice, but what the new code of practice does, it creates a structured request process, not only for employees, full-time employees requesting part-time work, but also part-time workers who might want to go to full-time work hours or just get receive more hours of work. So the code of practice suggest a four-stage application process. The first of which is the application process. So when an employee wants to make a request for part-time work, or if a part-time worker wants to go to full-time work, or if a full-time worker wants to go to part-time work, what does that request process need to look like from the employee? The second stage is conversation and discussion. So this code of practice encourages dialogue between the employer and employee when it comes to such requests. Previously, any request might be dealt with on an ad hoc basis where there may have been no conversation or dialogue between the employer and the employee. The third stage is the decision stage, which leads into the fourth stage, which is the fallout of the decision. So requests, they can be rejected. They can be approved by the company. If they are rejected, the company is encouraged to provide an objective reason for such request, and also employers are encouraged to have an appeal mechanism where any requests for an employee changing from part-time work to full-time work or vice versa. So that's something that could be included as part of the grievance mechanisms that exist within an organization. Um, Moving on from that, I just want to quickly look at the new employer PRSI Class A contribution rates. So these come in the 1st of January, but this update very much snuck under the radar in terms of updates with the amount of updates that have come through and are coming through in 2026. So the weekly, fortnightly, monthly employer Class A PRSI thresholds are displayed on the slide here. So as of the 1st of January, where an employee's earnings are above these thresholds, the employer rate for PRSI is 11.25% and 9% for earnings below these thresholds. And this is something that it has been captured. These updates, it has been captured by the payroll software, but it's because it's something that hasn't really been highlighted in general. Employers might not consider these new higher employer PRSI rates in their cost and budget projections for the year. So I think that's why that's why I'm highlighting these this morning, and it's quite important to do so. Okay, so also, by the time we have our next webinar in March, the new employment permit salary thresholds will have come into effect. So they're due to come into effect on the 1st of March 2026. Now, this is the first in a set of series of increases due to take place between March and 2030. The full suite of increases were due to come in next month. However, the government took a more gradual approach following consultation with employers, advocacy groups, and permit holders. So we have displayed the new salary thresholds for some of the more popular employment permit types. Um, One thing that I do want to highlight is that there is different salary thresholds for graduates now. For graduates who are applying for critical skills or general permits as compared to applications for ordinary workers. The reasons for the lower salary thresholds for graduate permits is to take into account graduates' lower earning capacity than that of an ordinary worker. So as I said, these effects or these increases are to become effective from next month, all the way through to 2030, and even probably beyond, considering by the time we get to 2030, the rate of inflation and cost of living will be factored in as well. So uh, they're all the updates I just wanted to go through with you this month. So just moving on from that. So Um, there are so there we within HR Body work with companies of various sizes across various industries. And as part of this webinar this morning, I wanted to highlight some of the more common policy pitfalls that exist within organizations. And we develop an awareness of these because of the queries that we do get from employers and preferred queries from employees. So there's three areas of employment law that I want to look at this morning, which would feed into policies that employers should have in place. Or if they do, they should be updating and reviewing these at the moment. So the first one I want to look at is CCTV in the workplace, which feeds into your CCTV policy. The first thing that I want to say on this is that where an employer has CCTV within the workplace, the employer must have signage to state that CCTV is in use and where it is in use. Um, if an employer wants to use CCTV, they must have a reasonable, valid, justifiable reason for the use of such. Employers cannot have CCTV simply for monitoring employees and their behavior or performance. There must be a valid reason for having such in place, such as health and safety, the prevention of theft, prevention of vandalism. CCTV can only be used where one would expect it to be used. So areas of particular risk, for example, maybe at a cash point. CCTV can't be used in areas such as where employees would expect privacy, areas such as bathrooms, canteens, changing rooms. If an employer did want to use CCTV in an area such as a canteen, there must have been several security breaches that took place in that area, and the employer must have it well highlighted that CCTV is in use in such an area. Um, because CCTV follows within the domain of GDPR, an employee has the right to make a subject data access request in relation to CCTV footage held by the employer that relates to that employee. A common query that we get here within HR Buddy is, can CCTV be used as part of disciplinary proceedings? So while the answer is that yes, it can, it must be stated within your policies that CCTV can be used as part of disciplinary proceedings. So as I mentioned, an employer must have a valid, legitimate reason for the use of CCTV in the workplace. Using CCTV as part of disciplinary proceedings wouldn't suffice as a valid, justifiable reason. As I said, examples of such reasons would include health and safety, security, prevention of theft. However, as I said, the employer can still use CCTV as part of disciplinary proceedings, provided it's made known to the employees. The employer can also use CCTV provided it's within the scope of the disciplinary and investigation itself. So, and I suppose a good example to demonstrate the use of CCTV within the workplace is a case Doolin versus the Data Protection Commission. So this one was looked at in the High Court and later went to the Court of Appeal. So in this case here, the company was investigating an incident involving graffiti within the workplace. That incident was non-employee related, but whilst reviewing the CCTV, the company identified that one of the employees was taking unauthorized work breaks and then used that during the disciplinary proceedings with Mr. Doolan, who was the employee involved. The company's policy stated that the company was using CCTV for security purposes, however, it didn't state that CCTV could be used as part of disciplinary proceedings. So Mr. Doolan brought a case, as I said, it went to the High Court. Mr. Doolan argued that the employer's use of CCTV wasn't compliant with the company's data protection policies, and the court agreed with Mr. Doolan. The court ruled that the use of CCTV in the disciplinary proceedings in this case was unlawful because the employer wasn't using it with their stated justification, which was for security. So the company wasn't allowed to use the CCTV as part of the disciplinary proceedings in this case, simply because it wasn't included in the company's policy or policies. So to go back to my question, can CCTV be used in the workplace? Yes, it can, but please ensure that it is included in your policies, including your CCTV and disciplinary policy. So one other thing before I finish up on this point, so what should be included in a CCTV policy? Examples, so what why the company is using CCTV, that must be included in the policy. So your valid justifiable reason, what parties may the data be shared with, what third parties, how long is the footage held for, and what security measures are the company taking to ensure that your CCTV is secure. Moving on to the next policy that I want to discuss is the double employment policy. And why is this important for employers to have in place? Well, I'll get into that. This policy, or the use of this policy in the workplace, is underpinned by the European Union Transparent and Predictable Working Conditions Regulation. So this came in 2022 and introduced a couple of different pieces of legislation, including in relation to double employment. So what this piece of legislation stated in relation to double employment is that an employer cannot prevent an employee from taking up a second employment with a second employer outside of their scheduled work hours with the first employer. Now, is there any restrictions around that? Well, yes. An employer can prevent an employee from taking up employment with another employer, provided there is an objective reason. Those objective reasons can include, as listed here, health and safety, business confidentiality, integrity of public service, the avoidance of a conflict of interest. So where an objective reason exists within your workplace that prevents an employee from taking up a second employment with another employer, it must be stated either within the employee's contract or in some other place, such a written statement, such as the employee handbook. So if you don't have a double employment policy in place, we always encourage clients to have those in place. Or if you have it in place already, please review it in line with this legislation if you haven't done so already. Moving on to the last policy that I want to look at this morning. It's in relation to the extreme weather policy. And this is topical not only at the moment, but it does become topical every winter. We're pretty much guaranteed an orange or red warning throughout every winter or even spring within Ireland. And when such warnings do occur, it does lead to a lot of queries to ourselves. Having a policy in place would resolve a lot of queries for both employers and employees. So just a piece of recent research that came out, which stated that 60% of companies don't have an extreme weather policy in place. And for companies that do have such a policy in place, only 16% of employees have good knowledge of such a policy. So um, it is vital. You will save yourself and your employees time in the long run by having such a policy in place. What does such a policy need to address? Well, it needs to address two things. First of all, um, what do employees need to do in the event of a red warning? So that would be case by case for each company and industry because it would vary. Can employees work remotely when there's a red warning? The second element to be answered is what happens with regards to pay when there's a red warning. And again, this varies by company to company because employees have no legal right to pay when the company shuts down for following a weather warning. So how a company treats this is up to the company. It may Employers may insist that employees take a day's annual leave. It may be an unpaid day, or companies may allow for payment on such a day anyway. So I said there's no legal entitlement to pay for when there is um, weather warnings in place. However, as I said, it does create a lot of confusion with employees as to what exactly is happening with the company on when there is such a weather warning. Are employees expected to go to work? Will they get paid for such? So having a policy in place would resolve, as I said, a lot of queries from both employees and employers in this aspect. So there are just some of the policies that I wanted to highlight this morning. They will not only make your life easier by having such policies up to date in your workplace will not just make your life easier, but it also create much less confusion amongst employees. So they're the key takeaways for myself this morning. I will now hand you back to Colin.
Thanks a million, Patrick. A lot of key insights there and a lot covered. And I can already see some questions coming on those, some of the topics you've covered there. So we look forward to getting your insight on those. So, so now we'd like to change gears and focus in on an area of huge importance to the well-being of your entire organization, and that is the well-being of your people. And as I said, I'm delighted to now hand you over to an expert in the field, Grace Walsh from Irish Life Wellbeing. Morning, Grace.
Morning. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Delighted to be here, and thank you, Patrick and Colin, for inviting us. So yeah, Grace Walsh from Irish Life Wellbeing. So delighted to, I suppose, be involved in the conversation and talk about something that we're, as a team, really passionate about. It's what we do day to day. It's something that I'm very passionate about myself. I've worked in this space for many years here in Ireland, but also very much in the UK and globally. And so being able to, I suppose, talk to some of the kind of research trends that we're seeing, but also then thinking about some of the things that we can kind of do to be able to support people. So great to flick on there. So look, we've kind of moved towards going from like a VUCA world. So a VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, a term we're probably familiar with, to a BANI world. So BANI is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. So that was an article I was reading, a Forbes article just recently, which I think kind of paints the picture really well as to some of the challenges that we're facing, not just here in Ireland, but very much globally. And just the level of uncertainty that we're having to deal with, navigate, is really unprecedented, and the impact that that is having. And so these are just some of the, I suppose, high level stats to touch on, I suppose, as a bit of a backdrop, and reasons why this is important, and the focus in on well-being, not only from that kind of, moral imperative, and the importance to be able to support people to be at their best, but actually the impact it's having with regards to the work days lost, and the economic impact as well. So 11 million work days lost annually due to absenteeism at work. And more recent figures paint the picture more around kind of 18 million plus work days lost due to absence in the workplace. And the majority of which is related to kind of stress anxiety and depression. So that, I suppose really is coming through in the more recent data as well, and the impact that that is having with regards to the cost to the economy. And I think a lot of us here on the session will be familiar with some of these, data points and stats with regards to absence in the workplace. So, I suppose some of the kind of challenges we're facing, if you can go on to the next slide, and I suppose the reasons why. So at Irish Life Wellbeing, we engage in a survey, a national survey here at the Health of the Nation. That'll be a report actually that will be made available at the end of today as well. So we can kind of go, I suppose, further into the detail around some of these bits. But that really is an opportunity for us to get like a pulse check as to where we're at here in Ireland, how we're feeling. And that is very much looking at well-being in that holistic way. So it encompasses our social connections and mental health, physical health and well-being, as well as our financial wellness. And I suppose some of the kind of key trends coming through and some of the strong messages that we're seeing, we can see here. So I suppose with regards to how leaders and managers are experiencing this kind of rate of change, the ambiguity that we're obviously facing day to day, just that kind of level of uncertainty is having an impact. And with regards to, I suppose, our ability to be able to cope, deal with that, but also as managers supporting our teams to really be at their best. So the impact that has not only at an individual level, but also the impact that has with regards to our team engagement, the impact of that to kind of the overall culture of organizations, expectations, but just the overall organizational health is being impacted. Stress levels continue to rise, and that has been a trend we are seeing over the more recent years. Especially, I think we saw that with COVID, and that trend is increasing, and we're seeing these that coming through very much so, particularly among the under 35s and the squeeze middle. So the squeeze middle is that cohort of the 35 to 55-year-olds. And that's driven by a number of factors, one of which is around social isolation. That is very much a theme we're seeing here in Ireland, but globally, the increased rates of loneliness and isolation. And I think it's important to talk about that. We're delivering a lot of workshops, and what we're hearing from people, and people have come up and said, I have a really strong family. I feel very connected with them. I have a really good kind of friendship network. I have great colleagues, yet I cannot shift these feelings of loneliness. But also as well, the whole kind of return to office conversations many of us are grappling with. Nobody knows exactly the right answer to that. So some of these, really kind of feeding into those levels of stress. The under 35s report the poorest mental health of all ages, and that's really significant. If we're thinking as well with regards to the workplace in 2050, they will take up the majority of the workforce. So really that early intervention, supporting people early in their careers is really so fundamental. And the working parents, especially mothers, experiencing that kind of growing pressure and strain. And I think for the first time, we're seeing a differentiation between the overall health and well-being of men and women. So up till now, we've been kind of neck and neck with regards to kind of, stress levels, how fit and well we are. But actually we're seeing for the first time some of those disparities coming through. And I think a lot of the kind of caring responsibilities coming into that. So the challenge is kind of, coming back, spending more and being more in the office. If it is, a lot of the kind of care responsibilities traditionally falling with women, and whether that be, caring for elderly parents, those of us with kids, etc. So yeah, if you want to kind of move on. So look, I think these are, I suppose, some of the high level data points. And again, the Health of the Nation report will be available. You can kind of delve into that in a bit more detail. But really kind of, I suppose, what are the trends? So what are the trends we're seeing from a research perspective? And that's really, really important, kind of that evidence-based piece. But also the anecdotal stuff we're hearing. We're in a position whereby we work with a large number of organizations, the breadth and depth of Ireland. And so what is it is that we're kind of hearing and seeing from people we're connecting in with, whether that be, the HR team, the broader kind of people functions across learning, well-being, but also then just from employees directly. I think there's that overarching theme. We're seeing that kind of managers don't feel equipped to be able to have those supportive, sensitive conversations with their teams. And whether that be kind of around neurodiversity, disclosure, mental health, returning from work after parental leave, to return to the office. So that's kind of an overarching theme. So really that focus in on upskilling managers to be able to have those supportive conversations, building that capability, really is a key piece. A lot of organizations are focusing in on a lot of our programs, and we're designing kind of really talk to as well. But the trends, mental health. So again, that really coming through on that previous slide as well, with regards to stress, anxiety, depression, some of the kind of more kind of ones that we see presenting in the workplace, and how it is that we kind of support that. Interesting as well around that kind of digital dependency. So this is a trend that we saw last year with regards to supporting people, kind of nurturing those healthy boundaries and our relationship with digital devices. We need digital devices. It's part of our day-to-day and what we do. We're all in front of a screen. We probably have one, if not two phones next to us. It's part of our everyday, personally, in a professional context. But actually, it's the kind of unhealthy use, but also as well the kind of distractions. So enabling people to really get into focused work where they can put the head down, without that kind of constant notification and distractions coming in, because of the impact that has with regards to our kind of well-being, but also our ability to be able to kind of get into those flow states where we're at peak performance, and able to kind of get through the workload. And look, I think the reality is that not one organization can be expected to kind of manage these complex issues. And I think that that's really important to recognize that and talk to that. And especially when it comes to kind of mental health, kind of the different life stages and challenges that we have, whether we're kind of early in our career, that kind of squeeze middle, or kind of moving towards retirement. But there are kind of real fundamentals that we can kind of do to create, I suppose, that space, that culture where we're kind of normalizing well-being. We're able to kind of talk to it and bring it into our kind of everyday conversations as well. And I'll kind of touch on that in a moment. But yeah, if you want to flick on there, it'd be great. So look, just some other trends that we're seeing, neurodiversity being one. And again, we've done a lot in this space, and we've seen lots of organizations really embracing this, where people feel comfortable and confident disclosing to their manager, and being able to talk about kind of reasonable accommodation measures that they can put in place that can really support. And it's great that we're having the conversation, but we need to do a lot more around this. And so some of the conversations that we're having is, again, looking at what are the things that we can do across the employee employee life cycle, so that it's, it really is enabling people to be at their best. And that can again be from, onboarding, being able to kind of create that space for people to kind of talk to this, be open. But also then there's lots of kind of tools and techniques that we can embed as just part of how we do things that can really kind of help people. So whether that be kind of communicating around meetings, having really clear agendas, to, providing transcripts for different webinars, meetings, and that type of thing. And there's a lot of tools out there as well, that are free and available, for people to be able to access. The other thing that we're really seeing, is that whole area around kind of parenting, and I think, as a mum of three very young kids, I can kind of relate to this. So when the data came through as to kind of some of those challenges that were experienced, that squeezed middle, it really resonated, and I know it resonated for a lot of people. But the impact of the return to office, and I think recognizing too the importance of being in the office, culturally, new people joining an organization, just being able to talk and really feel the values and the ethos of an organization, connecting with their employees. It's so important. But some of the challenges that people can face, especially when we have, collection of kids, as I said, those kind of broader caring responsibilities, and being able to juggle that. And I think, Patrick, you were talking about yesterday when we caught up, that kind of theme around the work-life balance that you're hearing from some of your clients as well, and when you're in conversation. So that's a massive piece. How do we get that balance? And that can be difficult, but very often as well, when it is, we have those real kind of clear outcomes with regards to expectations and the work that needs to be done, we can create a platform where people can kind of work really flexibly, as long as they're achieving those outcomes. At the end of the day, we're a business, we need to be competitive, we need to get the job done, but actually we can work in a way that's right for us. And that massively impacts just engagement, our motivation. We feel heard, we feel listened to, and as I said, then we can be at our best. So I suppose there's some of the kind of trends that we're seeing. And I think the key point here is, the time is to act now. Being able to think about well-being as being core and central to what we do as organizations, and HR plays a key piece in that. We talked about some of, I suppose, the what we have experienced as a workforce, and just the unprecedented levels of kind of change, uncertainty. I suppose the other piece we're very much kind of in at the moment is the introduction of AI, and we're all grappling with that, embedding it as part of what we do, but also, some anxiety around that. What does that mean? What's my job going to look like in the short and long term? The geopolitical instability, but also just the fact of building more inclusive workplaces, how we do that, and trying to get to tackling that, and that could be around kind of policies, but just also processes and how we support people. I suppose some of the key, and this isn't just specific to HR, this is across all areas in which we work. So kind of traditional approaches are no longer fit for purpose. And it doesn't mean that we're reinventing the wheel either. It's just that we are really thinking about how we can best improve, thinking about challenging our thinking, being innovative, creative in how it is that we can kind of support people. And so we're constantly evolving our strategies and our processes around this. Look, and I think we'll all recognize organizations that prioritize health and well-being have the strongest outcomes, and you see that the stats and the data around this is very clear. But also as well, it's that kind of long-term investment piece is really important, and thinking about that in that strategic way. So it's not just kind of a once-off, here we go, and the kind of box ticked. It's embedded as part of what we do. And we can't eliminate every stressor, and that's just not realistic, of course. But as organizations, we can play a huge role in reducing pressure and supporting people to be at their best. And that's very much the focus with regards to the World Health Organization and workplace well-being. There's a big role that we can play. And that's, as I said, a place that we want to be. As I said, it impacts at a personal level, but also as well, bottom line at the end of the day as well. So yeah, we can move on there, Patrick, just to the last piece. So I suppose as a final kind of I suppose outcome and points around and takeaways, just to kind of talk to some of these points highlighted here. I think in a world of AI and technology, the key for me, and if there's one piece to take away, is a human-centered approach. And whether that be in what we do, in our processes and our policies, thinking about at the individual at the core of that, or with regards to that, our leadership approach, really coming back to the basics of a connection with people, supporting people, being empathetic, creating a space where they can be their authentic selves and they can have an open conversation with us is really fundamental, and doesn't cost anything. But that shift towards that real preventative, proactive approach to our health and well-being is central, and really, really key. And thinking about it at that kind of strategic level. And so when I talk about kind of well-being at that strategic level, it is thinking about how do we embed well-being as part of our everyday conversations to support positive well-being. And that can be around, we often think about supporting people when they're having challenges or difficulties, but actually how it is that we support people to be at their best, talking about their strengths, what energizes you, that real kind of coaching approach, but also embedding well-being as part of the broader learning and development, the leadership programs that we have. It's part of the onboarding process. The recognition that having sustainable workloads, kind of clear boundaries, again talking to that piece, if it is we've clear outcomes and clarity as to what we need to do day to day, then we can work in a way that's right for us. And supportive managers, we know that good managers create excellent organizations, and that really is a key piece, and what we're hearing as well from the research and data. I'd say leadership accountability, role modeling as leaders is key, at leading out on initiatives, being present, embedding well-being. I'm one that we embed well-being as part of our kind of town halls at Irish Life Group within Employer Solutions, just so that, as I said, it becomes part of the everyday conversation. But thinking about well-being really in that holistic way. So mental, physical, social, financial, they do play into each other. And I think we can recognize that, when we're physically well, that will have a positive impact mentally. So thinking about, as I said, in that holistic way. The manager capability I touched on, and that can be around kind of a more coaching approach and having those supportive conversations, but really challenging our thinking. Are we creating a psychologically safe environment? And often organizations will say yes, but actually really when it is that you kind of go down to the nitty gritty, and that might not be the case of people feeling they can speak up, be themselves, challenge the status quo without feeling there'll be negative consequences to that. But also building flexibility into strategies. That is one thing with change and uncertainty. We have to be flexible around the strategies and adapt our strategies to best support people in the here and now, but also leading into the future as well. So that's me.
Grace, thanks a million. That was a real insight into understanding what well-being means to an organization, and a wealth of practical applications there as well. The Bali term was one for me personally. I hadn't heard that before, so that's absolutely a takeaway from me. So thanks so much. Now, unfortunately for me, I have to follow that. But very quickly, what I wanted to touch on from it is something that we discuss all the time here within HR, and I'm sure HR practitioners on the call as well would be of a similar mindset, and that is documentation. So just very quickly, from a compliance point of view, the last report that was issued from the WRC showed that workplace inspections were up 9% on the previous year. That was up to over 5,000 inspections. And of those, a large percentage of employers inspected were found to be in breach of some aspect of employment law. So, based on those figures, you'd have to say when the next WRC report is issued in the coming months that there'll probably be an increase on inspections again. In relation to if you look at complaints taken to the WRC, those were also up year on year based on the last report issued, and approximately around 10% of those do relate to either lack of contracts or something of that nature, which looks not the biggest cohort of complaints, but our view is that those are entirely preventable inspection issues and claims to the WRC. So what we just want to quickly recap for anyone that is unfamiliar with it this morning is that, of course, the law states that every employee must receive a written statement of their terms and conditions of employment. And the original act also allows employees or former employees to take a complaint to the WRC, and if successful, may receive compensation of up to 4 weeks remuneration. So that's fine. What many people may not be aware of is the requirement for the provision of what's known as the Day 5 statement of the core terms. It was originally 5 core terms in 5 days and another 15 terms to be provided within 2 months. That's now been amended and expanded. And another key point from the 2018 Act, as we see here, is that it also potentially criminalised any failure to comply with the Act. So that was important. And as I said, what must be included in the written statement was expanded by the 2022 regulations, as illustrated here, and the 2018 and the 2022 legislation also brought in more stringent rules around, for example, probationary periods, mandatory training, working hours arrangements, for example, the introduction of banded hours and so on. So it's just important that you're covering all aspects of what is required within the Day 5 statement and also within the wider terms. We'll touch on that in a moment. But just very briefly, I guess one final and further layer on top of all that legislation is the fixed payment notice regulations. What does that mean? It means inspectors can now issue on-the-spot fines, fixed payment notices basically, and it can be up to €1,500. In terms of breaches around that are maybe they're discovered during inspections around, we'll say, failure to provide employment documentation, failures around working time, record keeping, things of that nature. So it's important really for employers to know what these obligations are in terms of providing the 5-day statement, and it's important to recognise that the requirement for the 5-day statement, it supplements as opposed to replaces the existing obligations that were already there to provide employees with their full statement of terms and conditions of employment. So from a practical perspective, I guess what most companies operate in is it makes sense that employers consolidate all that into one document really, ideally a full contract of employment being issued to employees ideally before they start or within those 5 days of commencement. And if you look at what needs to be provided then within the month, you're still looking at lots of key points, including, we'll say, the further policies and procedures operating within the business in terms of disciplinary procedures and so on, grievance procedures, which essentially means you're also ensuring that your workforce has access to a comprehensive employee handbook in addition to the contract. So I guess as we look forward to the year and as you're planning different agendas and looking forward to what you want to achieve from a HR point of view, it's always just to touch base and reiterate the importance, I guess, of having good documentation within the business, making sure that it's compliant and there's clarity then for all parties involved, and avoiding any issues arising in terms of inspections or incurring any penalties or potentially convictions from that respect as well. So also this morning, as I said, I just want to briefly show you our all-in-one HR software solution, HR Buddy Manager. And I guess the main ethos behind HR Buddy Manager is to save business owners and managers time, streamline processes, make HR more effective and easier to manage. Just important to say as well, we've got a lot of questions on the topics that have come in today. I'm looking at them there. So what we'll do is we'll briefly run through the system here, and we'll have some time then to dig into your questions. So I'm going to briefly run through what the system can do in terms of some of the powerful tools that are available within the system. So firstly, I just want to show you when you log in, what you have is a very intuitive dashboard. This gives the user a snapshot of the key metrics that you may want to quickly review as a manager or as a business owner. I know that many business owners, for instance, want to see the state of play with the training adherence. They want to see the employees that are live on the system, leave requests, probation, so on. In terms of people tab, if you want to see who's signed contracts, who's waiting for contracts to be signed, you can see all of your active users. You can filter by different roles and so on. If you have an external admin or HR person logging in, and you have a very clean system to manage the workforce in terms of invites issued, active, cancelled, your active users, and so on. What this system means really is that I guess the days of paper-based new starter forms, putting your details and your IBAN down on a piece of paper and sending into payroll, that's gone. What you can do is you can digitally onboard all your people through the system. You issue the contracts. You can see what's issued, what's been signed by one party, signed by both parties, and so on. That's going to give you a very clear overview of what's happening. The AI review tool within the platform is very powerful in terms of lots of people, I guess, will already have contracts in place within the business. So what you can do is you can use our AI extraction tool to upload those details into your system. So, for example, if you're migrating your current staff onto the system, you can draft a contract, put it under the category of contracts here. And what you're going to do then is you're going to drag and drop the current contract in there, and that's going to be added to this employee's personal file then. You can also use that AI tool within the system to draft new contracts. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it very straightforward to go ahead and put in their details. So, for example, the terms, remuneration, working schedule, working hours, and so on, all the different policies and procedures that you may want to add into a different contract. And that can be tailored and amended based on the role and based on the organization and so on. You can draft a contract here pretty much in minutes, really, and potentially without a requirement for oversight from a HR person. And with the e-signature capability, that's going to go directly to the person, and you can see then, as we saw earlier, if they've signed it, and where we are with that in terms of the state of play. In terms of the time entries, this is a really key piece. The system is very comprehensive time and attendance and leave request module in there. You can select if someone's taking different types of leave, the various types of leave that are available when they want to take it. Important to say there's also the self-service aspect here in terms of employees requesting their own leave, and that's reducing the need for maintaining Excel sheets for leave balances and leave planning and so on. You can also see then that all that information is stored within a person's file locker within the system. So what we can do is we can select a user here, identify that person, and as I said, now when you invite them to the system, they do lots of this themselves, but you can also update their breaks. You can see that they'll be able to put in their next of kin, bank details, declare the health, and that's all stored then into their file locker. One of my favorite features within this system then is the learning and development piece, which, as you can see, you can upload different assignments into the system. We actually have some compliance training already preloaded into the system that you get free when you sign up. But you can also create your own training if you want to have, for example, it could be, let's say, a health and safety module. You can also set your reminders for your staff. You can add modules into it. And as we saw earlier, you can get up-to-date real-time metrics on your dashboard, who has completed the training, who hasn't. For example, here we put in a health and safety training, we add the modules, whether that's theory, whether that's, we'll say like a video or a document or so on, and drag and drop it in there. Also, a very key piece in terms of the time-saving aspect of HR Body Manager for anyone that's creating rosters on a weekly basis and publishing those. You can create and assign shifts to all of your team, update different types of leave, or you can create and assign a shift. Also, to save you time, what you can do is you can duplicate a week out, for example, rather than constantly creating the same week after week. You can create a shift template of recurring patterns within the system. So you can just create it once. That could be, we'll say, a morning shift, Or say, for example, if we want to put in, if there was a standard office hours template that's going to be in place each week, or evening shifts, weekends, whatever the case is, you create it for single days, multiple days, save the template, and you'll be able to publish that to your team. While you're working on the roster, it's not visible, but when you press publish and push it out to the team, it's going to go to all your relevant team members. They'll get an email notifying them of same, which is great for clarity. And because, as I said, in terms of the clocking in, this can be mobile first, can be geofence, a particular location in terms of a physical terminal, for example, which can be tied to biometrics or whatever way the client needs it set up for their particular business, and all of that then is published direct to mobile. And it also goes directly into the reporting section. So you get real-time data on working hours, your time in attendance. We've previously discussed the gender pay gap reporting requirements in our webinar series. There's a huge amount of information that's required and considerable time needed to compile this data. But what you can actually see here is that you can see that data in real time. You can generate your report, export it, and publish it and upload it to the state portal in the coming months with no time involved, really. Another nice feature that's in the system is the announcements, which means that you can create a notification. For example, if it's whatever the case is, early closing or different things that are happening, push it out to the whole team. And very lastly, just want to say that there is a dedicated support option within the platform as well. So look, if there was any issues, you can log into the help center. A couple of quick recaps. The contracts piece is very important, as we've said. You can use AI to upload and create contracts. There's roster management, shift planning, absence and planning, leave management, gender pay gap reporting, payroll ready exports from your report section, full API integration into your payroll as well. The compliance training is free and built in. So we have dignity and respect, diversity and inclusion built into the platform. It's fully tracked and audited from a quality perspective. And if you need that for ISO compliance, for example, team communication messaging piece is mentioned. You also have your secure file locker that's fully searchable, accessible, indexable, and assists with compliance as well. It reduces errors in terms of your contracts, your rosters, your learning development. This platform is going to enhance your decision making because you have that real-time data on your dashboard, whether it's time and attendance, probations, trainings, contracts being electronically sent out to your staff so they can receive the contract, review it, approve it, and so on. It's all stored into the file locker. So ease of use saves you time. As you can see there's a 14-day free trial available in the platform as well. And any questions on the platform, give us a shout. But that's a very quick whistle-top tour of the software. And yeah, I guess from looking at the Q&A, there's quite a few questions that have come in there. I'm not sure, Patrick and Grace, if there's anything that you want to come back on and take there.
There's two questions there in particular that I want to look at. So I'll just read it out there first of all. So if a general operator is renewing a permit, does that mean that they have to be making 36,605 euros? So I assume that individual would be on a general employment permit, but the answer to your question is yes, they would have to be making that amount even with a permit renewal for the renewal to be successful. So these salary thresholds would apply to new permit applications as well. Another query that I want to look at there regarding CCTV, if an employee is being brought in for an investigation due to alleged theft, do you have to include on the invite letter that CCTV will be used? So with an investigation disciplinary procedure, the employee has the right to receive all evidence and respond to that evidence. So I would you can definitely include on the invite letter that CCTV will be used and will be reviewed during the investigation meeting. Just be aware that, as I mentioned earlier, employees can make a subject data access request in relation to CCTV. So the employee can request a copy of the CCTV itself. So without knowing what actually is contained in the actual footage, you may need to redact other people's identities as part of that. So yes, it's definitely something that can be included in the invite letter. There
Excellent.
is there is another question that I think is directed at yourself, Grace. So be just looking for your insight. What are small incentives day to day we can have to have a more inclusive workplace within departments and within our company?
Yeah, and actually, I was trying to type. I wasn't sure whether we'd have time to connect in. I've also answered one there already, which I'll talk to briefly. But look, the small incentives that we can do day to day, um, I would say and it's not kind of one thing, because when we talk about building an inclusive culture and environment, I would say first of all, it's kind of challenging our own thinking and calling things out if it just doesn't feel right. So it's not one thing. I think one thing I will say, you know, that psychological safety is a key piece, and that is something many of us will be hearing and listening to as being fundamental in organizations today. It's not a new topic, but it's very much something that we're hearing and seeing more of. But how it is that we do that, where people can feel that they can kind of speak up, be themselves, kind of challenge things, ask for help without feeling that there'll be negative consequences. I will say that very often we'll say that we have inclusive workplaces, and definitely that is the intention. But actually, really kind of, I suppose, challenging our thinking, but also recognizing that it's an evolving conversation. It doesn't mean that we need to kind of know all of what to say or what's the right thing to do, but it is just creating that safe space for people to be open and feel that they can come to the conversation. I suppose as a kind of as brief a response as I can say. There was another question just there with regards to examples of what we can kind of introduce into the workplace that's cheap and easy, but to kind of increase that work culture and environment. So I did type a response back. But one thing, if it is that we don't have it within our organizations, what we're really seeing is creating that opportunity for an employer voice is really key. And one of the things that we can do if we don't have already is creating ERGs. So that's the employee resource groups. So it's really building a culture of well-being from the grassroots up. And we're finding actually that they have a passion very often around particular topics, whether that be kind of around disability, neurodiversity, around kind of mental health. And actually from that kind of the grassroots approach really is massively impactful, and can really create a lot of energy around some of the well-being initiatives strategically that we have, and we're trying to kind of implement as a kind of a brief response. But I've also responded more in the chat as well.
Yeah, there's absolutely loads there, really good, Grace, isn't there? I know you'd mentioned earlier that you'll issue a report document to all people who have signed up as well. So we'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of that report. We look forward to reading it, as well as a copy of all the slides today, because there was a lot of there certainly was a lot of information included in all of that. Yeah, look, we've gone way over today, but I guess it just speaks to the amount of information and the amount of detail that's needed to really dig into those subjects. So in a lot of ways, we've only scratched the surface as well. But I guess I'd just like to say thanks to everyone for joining us today and listening, and yeah, we'll follow up with all the information as well. Um,
Thanks everyone for your time and attention today, and thank you, Grace, for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
thanks, Chris. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Colin. Thanks. Bye bye.